All right, and we are live one more time. We have, let's see, me, the American Werewolf, top 10 Bill today, who has supplanted Listomaniac from last week. We have the other Ash, the twin brother of Ash, who was here last week, and I made a mistake. He is not here from the Nostromo. And wait, no, we have somebody. Blackbeard's Ghost. Okay, Blackbeard's Ghost is here with us today, and it occurs to me as I start this that I completely forgot to advertise the episode today. So I don't even think that Eric knows that we're here. Otherwise, Eric would be here quite loyally, but that's okay. It's our top 10. I was saying this, and, I'll do a quick 60-second thing, and then we can just get to it. I thought it was cool that, and I want to mention this. I said that we had 4 people on the panel, and we had 40 completely different movies. That was not something that we arranged, and we said, well, we compared lists or anything like that. Well, we got to take that off, and, I don't want the overlap, or, somebody said no overlap. We just came out with our own lists, and when we put them together, nobody had picked the same movie, and I think that's really, really cool, and a good signal for what we do here. Past that,
was going to happen, Mike.
Huh?
I was really afraid that was going to happen, especially my top 5. I figured there's no way these guys aren't going to have the same top 5 as me, and I'm happy that we're not.
Yeah. I mean, it actually gives us shit to talk about. That's really cool, because if you had picked your top 3 and that was someone else's number 2, they sort of cancel each other out.
Right.
Yeah. So let's just get to it, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right, so here we are with the top 10 list. I'm trying to do this as well as put a quick notification that we are actually doing this so people can see it, which was, sometimes kind of cool. But I thought we'd go in the same round robin format as before, where we'd start with Bill and then rotate to Ryan and then John and then myself. So number 5. Hold on 1 second while I get the ticker for number 5, getting it going here. Bill, what do you got for us? Number 5, lay it on us, brother.
All right, man. In my top 5 are pretty much definitive horror movies as far as I'm concerned. And my number 5 is John Carpenter's Halloween. The
original. Fucking man.
There you go.
Talk about
it. No, man. There is no scarier movie, and no movie captures the vibe of Halloween. At least when I was a kid watching it, I was like, wow, that feels like Halloween. The way he filmed it, the music, just the scenery, it really captured that feeling of this one night where you're supposed to believe that demons can walk the earth. And, in the movie, absolutely, there's a demon named Michael Myers creeping around. And there's definitely a reason why there's been a dozen Michael Myers movies since this, because this one's so goddamn good. The music is phenomenal. The score is phenomenal. Of course, the cast, Donald Pleasance, fantastic. And, it's just an all-around amazing flick.
I hear you say that, and I have to tell you, it never actually occurred to me to look at Michael Myers as some kind of demon. But that's an interesting perspective on it.
Yeah. I mean, he could be. He's not necessarily a demon. He's a psychopath or something else. But, You know,
No, but you know,
explain why he keeps getting up after he gets blasted in the chest 3 times with 357 shots.
Yeah.
Well, look at the fake face, the William Shatner paint over face.
Yep.
It makes him otherworldly.
Yeah.
I mean, you could easily call him that because it's, you know, it's very nondescript, and that's what I think creeps people out the most too. Because you don't see any reaction from him.
Yeah, right? It's very much that that I am no one kind of persona that we see in so many of the upper level possession movies and things like that. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and I always saw the mask paralleled in American Psycho with Jason Bateman. Jason Bateman pulling that mask off.
Yeah,
talking about how he's such an anonymous person in this corporate world. It was the same vibe. This mask. There's only one criticism I ever have about Carpenter's Halloween, and that is that they tried to make California into Chicago, and they failed because there's so many Chicago. And Chicago does not have palm trees, and you see palm trees, and those are the two things that drag me right out of the movie every time I see them. Once I noticed them, but other than that, I have no criticisms about this movie. It's basically a perfect movie as far as I'm concerned.
It is, and it still holds up. And you know something? It's one of those movies I haven't seen in a very long time. I'm going to have to catch up on that again real soon because we did the show on Zombies Halloween, and you know we talked about that in length, and I enjoyed those movies a lot. But that original classic, I mean, it's there for a reason. All right.
Yeah. No, I was just going to add to that real quick, and I think this. You know, Bill, last week you were talking about super franchises. I mean, this has definitely become a super franchise. And I think, and my number 5 is no exception to the rule. I think a lot of these movies, unfortunately, like the first one's always the best, but then every subsequent one, it's almost like it becomes a parody of itself or a cliche of itself to a degree, you know? I mean, like with Halloween, there's like 10 movies or something, but we finally got the real sequel, like 2-3 years ago. And
it was Halloween 20 or Halloween.
Yeah, that just confuses the hell out of me. So it's like, so basically all those movies from between the first one to this new one, like the official sequel, they essentially don't count, I guess. I mean, I don't.
This is what happens when I think you have studio executives in charge of creative content. We're more and more.
John Carpenter wanted to have a different Halloween movie with a different theme. Like Mike Myers was supposed to be one, and it was another, like a witch, the second one, and a vampire, the third one. He had a whole series of them lined up, and they said no, thank you.
Yeah.
Seems about right.
I could say number 2 was up there. It does come across as a sequel. But it still plays really well. It's the same night. It picks up where the it's the same thing.
Zombie very good. I'm sorry.
And the other one I was just going to mention, my honorable mention, is the Zombie remake, which I love it to death. So all 3 of those up in my top echelon of number 5 Halloween.
And even in this part 2 of Zombies remake, he does a tribute to what that part 2 was with the hospital scenes and things like that. Yeah. All right, let's move on to number 5. Ryan, what do you got for us?
All right, gentlemen, you better get to the chopper because he's coming. All right, it is number 5 is Predator. Okay, for me, I know it's an action movie. It's also a sci-fi horror movie. It's pretty damn solid. It is one of the most badass movies I've ever seen, and it still holds up. And what a great concept is, let's take 6 badasses, put them in a jungle, and have an alien hunt them. It's essentially the most dangerous game. And I teach that in school to my freshmen. And for years, I showed them this movie. And we would do a compare and contrast and stuff. And they had a blast. This movie is great. And it still holds up. And again, what I was saying about it becoming a parody of itself or a cliche, every other subsequent Predator movie doesn't hold a candle to this. I mean, I like the one with Walton Goggins. That's a good one, but this one's still it for me. It's still awesome. This thing is so unstoppable. And that's what I like about it, is that these guys, like, you're like, oh, this is Arnold. He's going to beat this thing. No. I mean, Arnold barely gets through alive. This thing blows itself up thinking that it's going to take Arnold with it. It essentially almost wins in that case. But it's still such an original concept. And when I saw it, and it's got like great actors, you got Arnold, you got Carl Weathers, Bill Duke, Jesse the Body, all these guys. I mean, it's just, for me, it's awesome. I mean, I know it's primarily action, but it covers the sci-fi horror, man. I mean, you really see the terror in these guys because they've never faced anything. These guys are hard-ass, like, military veterans. These guys are like mercenaries who think, they go in to take out the Russians or whatever, and then this thing is just stalking them. And it's invisible. It's got infrared, all this kind of stuff. And it hunts for trophies. When Bill
and I, when we covered Creature from the Black Lagoon, we talked about how, movies like Predator are the natural progression. A story like that, where you're sort of, you have people that are moving into the creatures. The creature's just being the creature. And so, you're just sort of moving into his territory, and creature's going to be the creature, and woe betide the person who tries to get in his way.
Exactly.
It is a fun movie. We're coming up on about 35 years of Predator, maybe even a little more or something like that. It's still a good flick.
I think it's one of Arnold's best. I mean,
Definitely
one of the most hard parts about it, though, is when the creature rips the spine and the top of the skull out of the guy's body. That scene turns it into a sci-fi horror movie.
Right.
And when they find the guys skinned hanging in the trees and stuff, that kind of stuff, you're just like, oh shit, because you're not expecting any of that.
Or he blows out Jesse Ventura's entire chest cavity.
And you weren't expecting Ventura. You weren't expecting Ventura to die so quick. I mean, he was still big in WW. Do I get sued if I say WWF? WWE. He was still big at that point. And that's like having Hulk Hogan in your movie and killing him in like the first 15 minutes.
Well, nobody would mind it. Nobody would mind if you killed.
That's
Hulk
true.
Hogan.
It was Hulkster.
A governor.
The train, the prayers, the vitamins. All right. So that brings us to John. John, what do you got for us? Number 5, brother.
Number 5 for me is new in the horror realm. Came out 2 years ago. It's called Brightburn.
Fucking A it is. It is.
And I stumbled onto this movie about 2 years ago. Quite literally, I tripped and fell and had to rest my leg, and I saw it in the movie theater. I said, let's go rest in there and go catch a flick. And it shocked the hell out of me.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Because, and we talked about this Mike and I have talked about this, I know, privately, and I know we've talked about it on the show with the whole Marvel superhero thing. But I didn't go further than that. Like, when I was growing up, reading comic books in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. But when I was reading them, like if you ever did the alternate Superman, it was like, what if Superman was raised by the Nazis? And he would be the uber Nazi until he has a moment of clarity, like, wait, Adolf is not taking these Jews to the opera. He's putting them in, but that's always, he had that moment. This to me is to answer everybody's question, you keep saying that Superman's too nice. Well, what if he was too evil?
Yeah.
Okay.
You saw him show, when he was showing his powers, the first thing he did was hide in the girl's room to watch her get changed or sleep.
Yeah.
Behind the curtains.
Hell yeah, he did.
He's that, what if that creepy guy in the corner that you knew in school had superpowers?
Right.
When the girl, this is what got me. And you saw him discovering it, and the child, and it didn't look, Brandon, which was his name, he didn't look evil. He looked like a kid not getting it, but he also showed no emotion, which creeps me out. And the parents were looking like Martha and John Kent, like they wanted to raise them, and all of a sudden when they saw it happening, you saw their world collapse.
Yeah,
they very much
terrifying.
Well, they were greedy and sort of evil too.
True.
Unlike Superman's original parents, these guys were well, at least the mother was going off the rails at the same time.
Yeah,
it was very much from a child's perspective, where a child figures out, wait a minute, I'm stronger than, it's that old argument. Do you do the right thing because it's the right thing, or do you do it because, there are consequences involved if you don't follow the rules? And this child begins to discover that he's sort of immune to the normal consequences. So I don't have to listen to you. I'm stronger than you are. Like he gets into it with his dad, and once he figures out that he's more physically powerful than his dad, and he's like 11. It's kind of over with. That there's no restraint there. Not to mention the fact that he's just, at the end of the day, he's not a human being.
Yeah.
Now this is a movie we're going to be. I don't want to get into it too much because we're going to be covering this in about a week or two. Right. But this is a fantastic movie. I love this movie. All right, that brings us to number 5 and moi. And I don't want to get too close to the mic. Move that away a little bit. My choice for number 5 is Frailty.
There you go.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
feel that when we mention the name Bill Paxton, everybody automatically goes to game over, dude, game over, that sort of thing. Yeah. And I feel that there was, a lot more to him than that. That kind of gets overlooked. And unfortunately, he was taken from us entirely too soon.
Yes.
And he did some fantastic work. I think that largely has been overshadowed by a lot of the more actiony kind of, blockbusters that he was involved in True Lies and, Aliens. And, he was in the Terminator, and he even did, he had a part in Predator 2 and these sorts of things. But this movie was just a completely original concept about a man who believes that he has been chosen at the start of the apocalypse by God, an otherwise unassuming man who is raising his 2 sons. He's a widower, and one day he just walks into their bedroom and says that God has appeared to him and told them that the apocalypse has begun and their family has been chosen to fight for God by killing people that he claims God shows him to be demons. And you have, and I've talked about this a lot in movies, how child actors tend not to work out very well because they're children, and there's a limited expectation for range. His 2 sons are just fantastic in this. And one son who claims to see what his father sees, and the other son who claims that his father has gone insane and is just a murderer. It's got Matthew McConaughey. It's got Powers Booth. I was stunned when I saw this. It's it's amazing.
So talk about Bill Paxton. You also got to mention when he was on a very popular movie called Titanic.
Yes. Oh, that's right.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the explorer guy. Yeah.
But he showed such gentility. And same thing with this movie. He creeped you out without sounding creepy. He could have easily had his eyes rolled up in his head and, God has picked us children. but it wasn't. There was a normalcy about him.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's funny because
he was
I always
comfortable with his quest, and that's what he knew what he had to do.
yeah.
And to go with Matthew McConaughey and Powers Booth, who are in it less than 20 minutes,
Yeah.
but taking small roles and politely saying I ain't a small actor, and
Yeah.
making them work.
Yeah.
They were. I mean, it was, and it's scary. It's that goosebump up the back of your neck, scary.
And directed by Bill Paxton.
Oh, okay.
Directed
Yeah, it's
by
weird.
Paxton.
I always forget that Bill Paxton is dead. Like, it's just one of those things that I guess because you can't really believe it, and then you're like, "Oh, that's right, crap, he died." And it's funny because he was around for years, and I forgot that he was in Weird Science and Aliens and all that other stuff. And I guess the first movie that I saw him in that I really started taking him seriously as an actor was Tombstone as Morgan Earp. And he was fantastic in that movie. And then I'm like, oh, crap, he got killed. I mean, that's what really happened to Morgan Earp. He did get assassinated. But it was just like he was really good in that role. I think he was overshadowed a little bit by Kurt Russell and Sam Elliott, but I think he was supposed to be because he was the younger brother. He was kind of the meek, kind of shy
minor
one.
character, yeah.
But
But
that's what he made those characters shine. If it was
Yeah.
actor, and that's the same thing going back to the movie with my pick. If it went to a lesser actor, they would have given a two-dimensional psychotic performance. He saw the depth in it and really just let's dig for gold, guys. Come on.
Well, I mean, that was the whole thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you found out. Well, I don't want to get too much into the reveal because I'd like to cover that at some point. Actually, but it's an amazing movie, and that was my pick.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to number 4. Quattro, Mr. Bill, lay it on us.
All right, dude. So we're talking horror movies. I grew up right in the smack dab of the tail end of the classic horror movie era, which ended right around 75, 76, right when Close Encounters and Star Wars took over everything. But the base of my knowledge for horror movies is built on 4 or 5 things: Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and of course, The Wolfman. Now, I grew up with all these older movies. They were from a different generation, and I felt like this movie spoke to my generation, and it was really the first time I went, oh, horror movies can be really modern and really, really good. And I'm talking about John Landis and American Werewolf in London, which blew me away when I first saw it as a kid, and I still love it today. It is a fantasy adventure land. It is an amusement park of references and quotable lines and just great scenes. I love this movie from top to bottom. I love the direction. I love the humor. I love the girl, Jenny Adegar. I love the fact that Rick Mayall from the Young Ones does a bit in this. I just freaking love it. I love the transformation. It was the first real modern werewolf transformation you saw that looked real instead of like you could tell it was frame by frame. It's fantastic. And this is the first time that a soundtrack really grabbed me with modern music, and it all played into the movie. You got Van Morrison, you got Creedence Clearwater Revival. This movie is awesome from top to bottom. I love John Landis, and I love this flick.
Yeah, it's funny when we were talking about when Mike and I had done Curse of the Werewolf, we were talking about the whole transformation stuff, and I was saying, how in that movie it's the frame by frame kind of thing. But yeah, this movie, the effects, I guess Stan Winston or Rick Baker, one of those guys.
Rick Baker.
Yeah, man, it's probably the best werewolf transformation, I think, in a movie, because you physically see him stretching and just the bones and all. It was really done well.
It was a painful transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got the impression that it was like he was on the rack or something because all his tendons were stretching and he could feel all of it, and it was just it was awful.
Yeah.
Hence why other movies are called The Curse of the Werewolf, because it sucks.
It's not.
But it's, and no offense, to give credit to John Landau, who directed the movie, who before that did Animal House, and did Blues Brothers.
He did Twilight Zone too, right?
Yeah, and to take James Naughton,
David Naughton,
I'm sorry, to have one disco hit called "Making It" and was the Dr. Pepper guy.
Yes,
and made it, and it worked.
Oh yeah,
the skeleton that was in the movie theater was done and operated by Frank Oz.
Yes,
who did Bert and Ernie and Ozzy the Bear. I mean, to pull this thing off, and you're right, it's very scary.
And to such a
walking through the apartment,
dead body be his guide through the whole process. What an original thought!
Yeah.
Oh, that's a funny, Griffin Dunn, where he's just decaying through the whole movie. Yeah.
There's a fantastic documentary. It's called Beware the Moon, and if you have it on DVD or Blu-ray, especially if you have it on Blu-ray, they have a retrospective of the movie, and they take you through every scene with the actors that were in those particular scenes.
Oh, cool.
So from the guy driving the sheep truck, whoever is left that's still alive, the people in the bar, even like the porno actress when they go into the porno theater, like she talks about what the experience was, and it's about a 2-hour documentary through the whole movie, and it shows you Landis is there. And I'm pretty sure, it's Landis. It's not Rick Baker. It's Landis. He actually has he has the wolf that Baker created.
Oh,
and he has it in this glass case. And it just looks like you've got it. He's sitting behind it.
Yeah.
And it just looks like he's got the bodyguard from hell. I'm just going to sit here and this thing is right behind me and good luck with anything you might want to try. For me personally, the werewolf is my favorite movie monster. And I've always felt that werewolves have never been given their due in the cinema. Right. The Dracula always gets top billing, I think, because there is a Dracula. It isn't just because they're vampires, but because there's one character, that's king of the vampires. And so there's something to focus on, whereas werewolf stories can be hit or miss. Depending on, there's no one king of the werewolves to focus on.
Exactly, yeah.
This is probably as close to the epic werewolf movie that I feel that werewolf fans deserve. But I don't mean to be a party pooper. I've always had a bit of a resentment against Landis for making it a bit too comedic. I would have, and this is just my particular preference, I would have loved like a horror movie without comedic elements. We've been having this conversation for a couple of weeks now. Comedic elements in horror, I think, are beneficial because they alleviate the tension. And then we get some movies that have no comedic elements, and we're going to get into some of those as we go. But I would have appreciated more horror and less comedy, because it does actually turn into a comedy, and that's just my one opinion out of 7 billion.
I can't go with you there, Mike.
I hear you.
To balance out the comedy, I mean, you did have these zombie mutant Nazis busting in and killing the family in his dream, which comes out of nowhere.
No, and this comes out, that's, I don't want to argue the point, but I mean, this comes out at the same time as, I think there were 3 werewolf movies. This was the same year as The Howling, right? And it was the same year as, I think, as that movie Wolfen, which wasn't very good. I don't even think that was a werewolf movie per se.
Movie sucked. The book,
the one with Albert Finney.
Yeah. The book was much better. Whitley Street was great.
Yeah, you were talking about that in the group the other day. All right, number 4, that brings us to Ryan. Ryan, what you got for us?
All right, it's another Arnold classic, the Terminator. The Terminator. I mean, yes, you could say action, but it's sci-fi horror. And Mike, I know you covered this already in a podcast, but this movie, all right, I think Conan basically put Arnold on the map and kind of solidified him as badass. But this really, I think, kind of launched him into the stratosphere, so to speak. Just the concept of this thing, a robot, essentially, some kind of cyborg thing, just completely unemotional, completely devoid of any kind of feeling or whatever, just constantly coming after you and killing everything in its way. It's not like Predator, where this thing was hunting for sport. This thing is just a killing machine. And Arnold was perfect for it. I mean, I know the original plan, I think they wanted Lance Henriksen. But I love Lance Henriksen and Paul Winfield and that as the cops. And it's so sad when they get killed because they're decent guys. But again, it just shows how much of a killing machine this thing is. And Sarah Connor has nowhere to hide, nowhere to run from this thing because it's just always coming after her, and it's almost unstoppable. I mean, and I like that concept of this thing just constantly coming after you, and you don't have anywhere to hide or anywhere to run from this thing because it will find you. It's programmed. It's determined to just find you and kill you.
When we covered this, I had done some research, and Arnold had initially tried out for the role of Reese.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
He didn't want to do the movie. He thought it was going to be a bad movie, and I don't know if anybody remembers this. About a year before, there was a really bad vigilante movie with a guy named Robert Ginty called The Exterminator. In Arnold's mind, this was going to be like some ripoff, and he's like, they just did a movie called The Exterminator. My agent's pushing me to do this movie called The Terminator. And, he wasn't enthusiastic about it at all. Cameron wasn't enthusiastic about Arnold at all, and the plan was to actually pick an argument with Arnold and then just kind of cut him loose, saying, "I'm sorry, I don't think this is going to work." They end up meeting, and he's very impressed with how intelligent Arnold is. And as they're talking about it, Arnold and Cameron at the same time realize that this is not Kyle Reese, this is the Terminator.
Yeah.
The idea was that the original Terminator was going to be much more like the Robert Patrick character in Terminator 2, the everyman that you can't pick out. You can't pick out of a crowd. But this guy had such physicality that, in the rest is history.
And I know we had this discussion before about last week with one of the Dracula movies with Christopher Lee not saying anything. And like you brought up about Rambo not saying anything. In this, Arnold barely talks. It's all just the physical presence and the physicality that makes him terrifying.
Well, he had such presence in terms of bodybuilding and the way to move his body that he actually created a lot of the things where like if he moved, it was like a door from the waist up. Like his whole body moved in that one way. In that one scene when they're having the fight in the garage, and he's just flying down those hallways. And like his eyes move, but his head doesn't move, and then it's like he's like a shark. And there are a lot of unspoken things that really made it work, aside from the fact that it was a completely original concept.
Oh yeah, totally original. And that one, I've stayed away after T2 and T3. I stayed away from the other sequels. I probably should have stayed away from T3, but it was okay.
I like T3.
It was, but I think it's just, again, I think it's falling into, especially with Arnold, because he's older now. I think it's bordering on becoming like cliche.
It's a parody.
And a parody of itself. And it's, again, the first one is always the best. So.
All right. John, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Okay.
You guys covered it all, and I know, we don't want to, gam up the thing. I just thought it was Schwarzenegger had 17 lines, and one of them was spoken by a woman.
Oh yeah.
And that was, that was.
Yeah.
And it made it work. Less is more.
Yeah. The idea that his accent, Cameron really liked his accent because he said it sounded something like Skynet couldn't perfect the language.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so they got this, it sounds, because like people weren't familiar with Arnold at that point. Some people had gone to see Conan, but it wasn't a mainstream hit. And so you have this guy, and it's English, but it doesn't sound, and so his idea was that, okay, Skynet couldn't quite get, language down. And so, this is just what he sounds like, and he's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Schwarzenegger did Hercules in the 70s. And
that's right, Hercules in New York.
That's terrible.
And they dubbed in his voice with an American actor.
Oh, it's awful.
People freaked out. 10 years later, he's noted for it now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's his stick.
And I don't think that they. I think that they've released it now with his original voice. It's an hysterical movie.
Yeah,
it's funny as hell. All right, that brings us to John, number 4, brother.
Imagine waking up in a strange hotel room and finding out you're wanted for a series of murders. That's the beginning of Dark City. 1998 film. Falls into the category to me, and I'll defend on this one because of the science fiction aspect of it. But it's also film noir. It's very shadowy.
It is noir, yeah.
It's very smoky. There are people in it called the Strangers who creep you out, especially the way they chitter. And they're actually spiders that are inside people's heads, and they're inside the bodies of dead people.
Oh.
And they bring them back to life. And basically what it is this guy, John Murdoch, who has no idea who he was and where he had been. And these people want him for a murder, led by William Hurt, who's a detective. And there's a doctor character played by Kiefer Sutherland, brilliantly played, because he's a nebbish. He's not like the action Kiefer. And there's aliens trying to study human emotion and what is the soul. So it goes on a philosophical level. The director of this film also directed iRobot. He directed Knowing. He does a movie like every 4 or 5 years. He was getting grief from the studio because they said he was making too smart of a movie. And that's where I want to go with this. This is a smart, scary movie. It's the way they come out of the shadows. It's the way they move. Hell, I cannot remember the actor's name, but we were joking about Rocky Horror Picture Show. Part of the script was written by the guy who played Riff Raff, and he's the head villain in this.
Oh, jeez.
He changed his name so no one would say it. You couldn't recognize him till the very end. You found out like 6 months after it was out, it was that actor. But he did it on purpose because he didn't want people to think it was a spoof. It's very dark. It's very brooding. It's very intellectual. And there's some genuine scares to the point where like the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, shit! Because it just came out of nowhere. And that's what I like about it.
I saw this movie once. I think it was with your brother, Paul, but I don't recollect anything.
Yeah.
Except that it was very dark and broody, the way that you describe it.
When it came out in 98, Roger Ebert, when he did the list at the end of the year, this was his #1 movie for the year.
Okay.
And he gave it a quote that there's a documentary out that says, the best movie you've never seen.
Okay.
Yeah, It's a really good flick.
I think it's on Amazon now. Yeah, I think it's on Amazon if you want to catch it. All right, so that brings me to me again. And for my pick for number 4, I went with some more Polanski. And I went with The Ninth Gate.
Woo!
The Ninth Gate to me is just one of my all-time favorite horror movies. And if you know me from back in the day, you'll know that a character who drinks, smokes, and reads books is somebody just right up my alley. I mean, that's just, that is just absolute perfection. This was just one of the last movies that Depp did where he played the straight man before he started spiraling off into the Disney universe with Pirates of the Caribbean, although, I got nothing against Pirates of the Caribbean. But back when he used to do those small, independent kind of movies where he just kind of picked the odd ones. And this one was up there. The story of a man who's kind of a rare book detective, but a scumbag who gets hired by a billionaire to search for a book that might be written, or to authenticate a book of a billionaire played by Frank Langella, who's fantastic in this movie. I love Frank Langella in this movie. As Boris Balkan, who's trying to authenticate this book that may have been written by Satan at the time of the Inquisition. And it just sends this kind of compromised, sleazy kind of book dealer kind of guy down this spiral of horror with murder and, not overtly supernatural elements, but just this constant creepy tension. I don't know that it's Polanski's best, but it is one of my just all-time favorite movies. I have to watch it at least once a year. He just, as he's skipping and jumping all over Europe to authenticate 2 other copies of the book, because what you figured out is that apparently the book, if you perform the rituals correctly, the Prince of Darkness will arise, and for some reason for Frank Langella, it's not working. It does have comedic elements in it that are kind of funny, but it's a great movie. Lena Olin is in it. Really good stuff.
So you like drinking, smoking, and reading, Mike?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't smoke anymore.
Are you gonna?
I don't drink that much anymore. So but I still love to read books.
So we're going to see this podcast change to an American Johnny Depp in New Jersey.
I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that that's actually going to happen. But I'm willing to talk about this book.
I'm thinking on it because I love this movie too.
Yeah,
and I stumbled on it the first time quite accidentally. I didn't even know it was Roman Polanski until about the 4th time I saw it.
Yeah,
I really just got into it, and it's also based on a myth.
Oh,
there is a story of a myth in Catholic lore during the days of the Spanish Inquisition that there was a book. It was bound in skin, and it was supposedly written by Lucifer himself, the fallen angel, that he possessed the person.
Yeah,
write it. It was a counter answer to the Bible, per speak. That's what really got me into it, because there was so much detail in that the creepiness stayed with you even in break scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
You were still creeped.
It's a solid flick, like I said before, I know people have their beef with Polanski, but I'll tell you what, I mean, when I see that Polanski's made a new movie or that there's a Polanski movie that I haven't seen, I go out of my way to watch it, because he makes great films. He's a fucked up person, but he makes great films, and fucked up people make the best art, like I said last week. So there you go. All right, that moves us to number 3.
It's magic number
12.
And they say that things happen in 3s, and the first thing that's going to happen with this 3 is Bill's going to give us his pick.
All right.
Lay it on us.
Well, dude, continuing with the classic horror movie tropes, the Dracula, the Mummy, and all that, Frankenstein, etc. On to those basics is a modern thing. It's been grafted onto the classic horror movie trope, and that is zombie movies. This is very much a modern thing, and it all starts with George Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
There you go.
If you haven't been living under a rock for the last 20 years, you know that zombies have exploded in all media. Everyone's in love with zombies now. Back when I was a kid, no one dug zombies. It was such an underground thing. Ew, dead people walking around eating people. Now it's like everyone and their mother wants to talk about zombies. But this Night of the Living Dead is the classic. And it's not only a classic movie, but it is really guerrilla filmmaking. He had almost no money. He filmed it in his hometown on old black and white stock, and made an absolute brilliant countercultural revolution movie. Because we all know George Romero was using this concept of zombies in order to talk about the possibility of a communist revolution in America and what would happen to society if that happened.
He was only off by about 50 years.
Right. It's a brilliant movie. Not only does it have a grand metaphor, but it is quotable as hell. I don't think anyone has ever not said they're coming to get you, Barbara. And when you're walking through a graveyard or near a graveyard, it's an amazing flick. And it also was one of the earliest movies to really, really feature in the lead, taking charge, an African-American fella named Dwayne Jones, who was amazing. And that movie was just such a great flick from top to bottom. And I'm not talking about dead people eating the flesh of other people. I'm talking about the performances, the acting, the pacing, the cinematography. The whole thing is great.
It's not terribly gory.
No, it's not.
No, but it's still pretty horrific. I mean, and that's a testament to good direction and performances. Yeah, good stuff.
The sound also is amazing in that movie.
Yes,
because of how big dark it is. When you hear something shatter, it's almost combustible. When you hear them chewing on the meat, you hear the lip.
No.
I mean, it's the sound. It puts it in your head. Hey,
this thing spawns so many cliches and tropes. One of his producers went on to make Return of the Living Dead, which created that whole different realm with brains. We want more brains.
Brains.
Yeah, it was really it was done in Italy by Fulci, a series of movies called Zombie with an I, and it has the single best zombie kill in any film ever. They did a zombie encountering a real shark. I don't know how they wrangled it, but if you've never seen that Fulci's Zombie, you gotta see it. But don't dive into any kind of zombie movie, whether it's Walking Dead or X-World or whatever the case may be. You got to start with Night of the Living Dead.
I agree.
So start from there.
I think we're going to be covering our first zombie movie on tomorrow. Tomorrow's our first zombie movie. Rod and I will be on the Late Show with Train to Busan.
Oh, yeah.
Which was one of the movies that we talked about last week. So, yeah, looking forward to getting into that. I was never a huge zombie fan necessarily. I mean, I've watched The Walking Dead like everybody else. And when they come out, I'll watch them. But, like I said, the werewolf has always been my favorite. Is that your favorite, zombies?
No. I just I loved the zombies when they first started filtering up to me when I got to college. It was like a foreboding thing when I was in high school and in grade school. And I couldn't wait to find this Night of the Living Dead. And you couldn't see it anywhere. They weren't playing it on TV. This was before the age of VHS. It was just this legend that I heard about. And when I finally saw it, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Good pick. Ryan, what do you got? Number 3.
All right. This is one of the most classic horror movies ever made. Tops pretty much every top 10 or top 5 list you will ever encounter. The Redoubtable Alien. Okay. The first one. This movie still scares the absolute crap out of me. It is a masterpiece of horror cinema. It's a masterpiece of science fiction cinema. What I also like about this is it came out, all right, sci-fi movies were all the rage in the late 70s. You had Star Wars, you had Close Encounters, you had Star Trek, all these goody two-shoes movies. And then here comes Alien and just bulldozes the crap out of all of them. And the cast is fantastic. And as far as I'm concerned, Ellen Ripley is the gold standard for any kind of badass female character. And she starts out as, but I like the fact that she's not the main, she's like the whatever officer she is on the ship. Okay. She's not the main person. The cast is fantastic. The late great Yaphet Kotto is probably my favorite. Everybody in that movie, it's just it was unheard of at the time to have, like Mike said, a horror movie that's set in space. Okay, that was really never done. I mean, you can go back to the schlocky 50s stuff, but this was a whole new realm. Never before had we seen an alien as creepy as that. I mean, the xenomorph is still, H.R. Giger was a weird dude and had some weird art and stuff like that, but he knocked it out of the park with this alien creature. And it's amazing because there's nowhere. Again, it's another movie where there's nowhere for these people to go. They're being hunted by this thing, and it's going to get them. And there's and even right up to the end, you're tense because you're like, oh crap. And even though Ripley lives, you're still like, oh crap, is she going to make it? And this kind of stuff. When she knocks that thing out of the airlock, all you want to do is cheer because it's just like, oh, she finally got this thing. I mean, it's an absolute masterpiece.
Ryan and I, along with John, your brother Paul, John, and a couple of other people, about 40 years ago. Well, not 40 years ago. We went to see the 40th anniversary of Jaws on the big screen, and they played it here locally, and a bunch of us went to see it. It would have been equally cool if they ever released this. I would love to see this on the big screen.
Yeah.
But, I saw this in the drive-in. Because up until the time, the first movie I ever saw in an indoor theater was The Empire Strikes Back. Everything up until then was played at a local drive-in that was about 2 miles down the house from my parents' house called the Circus Drive-In.
There you
So
go.
you put that speaker inside your window, and you just get that tinny sound. But it was everything back then, man. One of the things I think that makes this movie work is the fact that they actually have an actor playing the alien.
Yeah.
It's not special effects. So you wouldn't see that today. Everything would just be CGI'd. There's something we've talked about this before, how your brain sort of registers when there's an actual person there. Even if it's the old Godzilla movies where it's a guy in a rubber suit, there's something in your brain that recognizes that this is tangible, this is real. And
it was some real tall, like Nigerian guy or something.
Yep.
I think played the same thing with Predator. Predator the alien was the late Kevin Peter Hall. So you had a real actor in there doing the thing. I mean, I can only imagine what the actor who played the xenomorph must have gone through. I mean, that costume had to have been so cumbersome and just hard to move and heavy with that long head, and it must have been a workout.
Well, if you think about what they had to go through in the pillow scene where John Hurt kind of has it come through his chest. No one was told what was going to happen.
I remember.
If you look at that, the one girl, the actress who I can never remember her name, the way she's screaming,
Veronica Cartwright.
She was destroyed.
Veronica Cartwright.
They had no clue what was going to happen. But that was Ridley Scott. He filmed a haunted house.
And he said that he had projected at them about a quart of raspberry jam or something like that. So it hit like a quart of raspberry jam just coming at you high volume, hitting you in the face. You'd be like, oh, what the hell is this? My favorite scene in that. Go ahead.
No, real fast, a side note, because you guys talk about Ripley, and I agree. But when there's a documentary on it, and they said when they were casting it, they said, hey, is Ripley a male or female?
Nice.
And Ridley Scott went, I don't know. Because they didn't know. Think about Meryl Streep got that part before Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, my God.
He turned it down to do Kramer versus Kramer.
Thank God. Good. Go right ahead, please. Do us a favor. Thank you.
No, that was the point. It was everybody, all the female actresses in New York were diving for that part to play that part because they thought it was a meaty role.
Well, and that's
they initially thought about having a guy. John Hurt was supposed to play Ripley.
Well, that's what I was saying.
It wouldn't have worked. No, it wouldn't have worked. It would have.
And that's what I was saying. You're not
that movie.
Yeah, and you're like I said, you're not expecting Ripley to be the person to make it out. It kind of sets it up like because Tom Skerritt's the captain, so you're thinking, oh, Dallas, okay, he's the hero. He's gets killed. Everybody dies except her. So
that's the most horrifying scene for me is when Tom Skerritt gets it and he's going down that dark tunnel.
Yeah,
he goes down the ladder one level and just runs right into it.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, move, and he just keeps moving, and he starts to panic, and then he turns, and it's right there, and you're like,
and then,
shit.
In that deleted scene, you see him in the cocoon or whatever. Yeah,
cocoon.
She finds him.
Yeah, she kills him.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Ooh, excuse me. Excuse me.
Who are you yelling at?
I got feedback. Sorry about that.
That was
that leads us to John. John, what do you got for us? Number 3.
The Return of Sam Raimi.
Hey, all right.
The horror film, Drag Me to Hell.
Love it.
I'm not going to talk about much on this because Mike and I think, are doing this coming up
on Thursday.
Yeah.
On Thursday. Plug. But this brought Sam Raimi back to the horror genre. And I know, Mike, you were talking about doing American Werewolf in London and you didn't like humor in your horror. I liked it in this movie, too. It was very funny. It was also, and I'll talk on this more on Thursday, but it was a morality tale. More than a horror story.
Yeah.
And the point about it was, it wasn't Judeo-Christian.
Right.
It was based on a Greek demon. And the story about it was, what happens if a good person, a morally good person, makes a choice for their own benefit and they have to pay for it? And it really worked so much better than I thought it was going to be. I admit I watched it because I was going to expect the humor. It scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, it's a scary movie.
It's a scary flick, and I would have loved to have seen Ash in it.
It's
cars in the movie. And Sam Raimi turned around and said Bruce Campbell was going to come in one scene to save her as Ash.
Oh,
he couldn't get off a film shoot that he was doing. And it's the only movie that Bruce Campbell isn't in, of Sam Raimi's.
His star is in every single one of them, including the third Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Army of Darkness.
It's supposed to take place in 1400s, but his car is there.
Yeah. Exactly. He said, because Sam Raimi, I saw him in an interview about this, and he said him and his brother wrote it, and they put it on a shelf for 10 years. And then he did the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And that's when the studio gave him the money to do it.
Right.
So technically, he didn't do it because those 3 movies brought in $1 billion to Sony.
Yeah.
So they were very happy to hand him the money to do this movie.
Those 3 movies, I mean, we had assumed, falsely, thank goodness, that Raimi had gotten away from horror.
Right.
And he was moving more towards his action genre. And I enjoyed those Spider-Man movies, not so much the third one, but they were decent movies for their time. And then he hit us with this. And then about 5 years later, came back and remade his own Evil Dead movie. And that is perhaps one of the best remakes I've ever seen in any genre across the board.
Yep.
I love that movie. I love that remake.
And I won't talk any more about it because I know we were talking about it on Thursday, 8:00.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. All right. That brings me back to myself. This is a circular conversation. And for number 3, I have selected a classic that has just passed the 30-year mark. I'm talking about Exorcist 3. I went to see Exorcist 3 in the theaters, having no expectation whatsoever. I'm not even sure at that point if I had seen, I'm sure I had seen The Exorcist, but it wasn't a prominent movie in my mind. And this movie was horrific from start to finish. And this is a perfect movie in terms of what I prefer, blending horror with comedic elements. There's some comedic elements in the very beginning, but they quickly sort of melt away as you descend into this nightmare. This was written and directed by William Peter Blatty, who was the writer for The Exorcist. It's somewhat based on his follow-up novel, Legion. And this takes place 15 years after the events of The Exorcist, where the detective William Kinderman is played by George C. Scott. And he is attempting now to solve a new spree of murders in Georgetown by a serial killer who went to the electric chair 10 years prior. It is connected to the original story, and I find this to be, even though it wasn't what Blatty had in mind, the studio executives did force him to have an exorcism scene with Nicole Williamson as the priest, this, that, and the other.
Nicole Williamson.
He's good. He's good in this.
Yeah.
I find this to be it was an unnecessary movie. But I find that they had some balls. They went out and did it, and it works. This movie is scary as fuck. This is Brad Dourif's greatest performance, in my opinion, as the Gemini killer, James Vinderman. Brad Dourif is so frightening in this movie for a person that's just sitting in a chair the entire time. I would put him up against Hopkins' performance in Silence of the Lambs in a heartbeat.
Well, I love George C. Scott. I mean, he's one of my favorite actors, and he had an awesome presence in everything he did. And I love his quote about why he never accepted any awards at the Oscars or anything like that, never attended, because he called it a meat market. And that just is him in a nutshell. I love everything he does. I'll watch. You know?
Well, I mean, I think we're going to cover some George C. Scott horror in the near future. But I mean, horror is not his forte.
No,
Go ahead, John.
I disagree with your thing saying, Michael, that it was an unnecessary movie. Only because I genuinely thought this was a nice follow-up to the original Exorcist. They did a sequel to Exorcist with Linda Blair and Richard Burton, but that was horrible. This stayed on that, not just story-wise, but thematic-wise, the tension and fright-wise to the first one. And I mean, they found that actor, and that was the priest in the first movie.
Yeah, Jason Miller.
He was retired, and they asked him to come back to play it again. And Jesus, these were stand-up performances, and it scared the shit out of you.
Well,
I watched both of them back to back one night on a Halloween with my roommate and two of her friends. And by the time it was over, I had to drive the two friends home because they were terrified. It really is that type of scary movie.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, this is an authentically scary fucking movie. But what I meant when I said it was unnecessary, you could have left The Exorcist alone and just said that was a worthy wrap up to how the characters, and you know, they did two other prequels that were not necessary. One of them was okay. The Dominion one I thought was directed by Paul Schrader. But then they came back again, Fox, and created a 2-season series on The Exorcist. And the first season I thought was worthy. With Gina Davis. And that's what I mean by unnecessary. You didn't need to make it because most of the issues within the story are still kind of resolved within the first movie. Right, you resolved even more of them in the third movie, but then you come back, 20 years later or 25 years later and make a completely, I mean, you're just taking a huge risk is what I guess what I'm trying to say. And if you could just as easily fall on your face doing these sorts of things, but it didn't because they were good. And that first season of that television series is scary as hell, and I won't even get into what it's about. Second season, not so much, but this movie, an all-time favorite, worthy, possibly close to equal to the first one, close to equal.
Yeah,
but I won't say it's equal, but it's close to it. All right, that brings us to, we're bringing it down to the top two. There's only two left per person. Bill. What do you got? What's your number two, brother?
Okay, another common horror movie trope that was mined and sort of invented by this guy who we've already mentioned, Sam Raimi, along with George Stafford and Bruce Campbell. And I'm talking about the original Evil Dead.
There you go.
One of my favorite movies. I know everyone talks about Evil Dead 2 because it's got all the juice and the comedy in it, but this one is another movie that I was never allowed to see because it was given such a bad rating, and it was such a controversy when it first came out. I remember being a kid and seeing the commercial with the camera leading up to a gravestone and then the hand reaching out from the gravestone. And that's all they showed because they wouldn't show any scenes from the actual movie.
Yeah.
It was banned in England. It was banned here. I could not wait to see this movie, The Evil Dead. And it turned out it was nothing like the hype. The hype kept saying it was a horrible movie. It was degenerate. It was way too graphic. When I saw it, I was like, oh, I get it. This is Three Stooges in a horror movie. And it was brilliant. And it was over the top ridiculous, but it was also effective. It's spooky as hell. The cheapness of the cinematography and the film stock that they had to use makes it really scary. It's a real cabin out in the woods. They built their own dollies out of 2x4s and ran them along the ground.
Wow, that's funny.
To create the demon coming into and it all worked. These guys were brilliant, and they beat up on Bruce Campbell so bad in this one. They beat up in every single movie. Bruce Campbell is my #1 horror movie icon. I love him, and I love this movie.
The carts rolling along the ground were frightening.
Yes.
I found that to be genuine, especially for the age, which we were, 13 or something, 14 or something like that. And you're coming off of, the Universal classics, and then you're coming off of Hammer classics, but this was something else.
Yes.
And you're like, what the hell is, and so this is, our sort of exposure to our own generation's, genuine horror, which, with actors, directors like Ridley Scott and, all these different people, and, now Sam Raimi, went in a completely different direction, and they were quite scary.
It's weird that 7 years after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this movie comes out, and it's really responsible for the explosion in slasher movies throughout the 80s. Not so much Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but
I agree. Yeah, I'll give you that.
The scene that did it was the pencil into the Achilles tendon. That one just makes you cringe so bad. They make up for it with the whole face melting thing. It's fantastic. But I mean, just the creepy woman with the white eyes trying to push her way out of the basement and just talking to Ash. It's so effective and it's so worked.
On one of the many spring breaks at Stockton, where I didn't go on spring break because I couldn't afford it, and I was doing a show, H-Wing first floor lobby, we saw this movie. And I was sitting with several of the usual suspects that somebody would know. And I distinctly remember at the very end when it was over, after nobody wanted to leave and we were screaming and skirming and everything else, I think my brother Paul put it the best. Oh, what the fuck? Rewind it. Let's do it again. And I think that was probably the best way to watch this movie.
And it
twice, man, because it is just fantastic.
It also spawned. It also spawned
rolling on a VHS, digging the guts out of a pumpkin, and just watching this thing play out.
It also spawned a really hilarious musical, Evil Dead the musical. And you have to wear trash bags. If you're sitting in the first row, it's so gory. You have to wear trash bags like you're at a Gallagher show because you will get splattered.
Anyone watching, you got to see this play. You got to go see it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, that brings us to Ryan.
All right. Speaking of splatter, we already covered this one on a previous podcast. My #2 is my favorite John Carpenter movie, The Thing. Okay, that is my favorite of his movies. It's for me, it's a Halloween staple. I watch it every year. We talked in depth about this on the other previous podcasts. So if you want to go back and listen to this one or listen to that one, feel free. Just to sum it up, it's just, I love it. I love the sense of paranoia among the people. I love that whole suspicion of you could be the person or you could be the alien and things like that. And the famously ambiguous ending is always a treat, and there have been myriad videos of and theories of how it could have ended and who got infected first, and who is the thing at the end. It's just, there's always new things people are discovering about this movie. And and again, I've never seen the original, the 50s one with Marshall Dillon, but this is one of the few times I think where the remake exceeds the original by leaps and bounds, and just the stuff that Carpenter got away with. The effects by Rob Bottin are legendary. That is for my favorite scene in that. The freakiest scene in that movie for me is when the one guy's on the table and his stomach opens up into the mouth and eats Richard Dysart's arms, and then the head comes out and his head comes off the table. It is just an amazing special effects feat, and it is so gross and nasty and realistic. I love the copper wire scene. Every moment in that is memorable. The cast is fantastic. I've always been a Keith David fan, and Kurt Russell is one of my favorites. It's just, we talked about it in length. So if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and go see it. And that's it. I mean, I haven't seen much Carpenter, but this is, for me, this is it.
I'm surprised, kind of pleasantly, that we didn't. There's only 2 Carpenter movies so far on the list. Well, Bill hit with Halloween, and you with this, but it turned out the way that it turned out, so that's cool.
Technically, most of the rest of them are action sci-fi.
Well, except for Prince of Darkness, though.
That's Prince of Darkness and the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah.
Mouth of Madness, that kind of thing. The Apocalypse trilogy. Stop that. What are you, Eric? And what was Vampires?
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
It's
That movie that I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. It's a John Carpenter vampire movie. It's a John Carpenter.
Is that the one with James Woods?
Yeah.
Okay.
My favorite line in a John Carpenter film is from The Thing. It's when Kurt Russell is walking through at the end, and the thing actually appears out of the ground, and he just lights his dynamite and goes, "Yeah, well, fuck you too."
Yeah.
And I saw that in the movie theater, and I howled. I just burst it out. Because that's probably the truest line. If an alien creature appears in front of you, fuck you. You know it's going to happen.
And I was saying this.
Uttered by an action hero.
I was saying this on the podcast.
Type deal.
Yeah, I was
what
saying.
What else were you going to say? Something simple and charming? No, fuck you.
Yeah. I was saying this on the podcast. With Wilford Brimley, I had never really put much stock in Wilford Brimley before because I didn't really see him in anything. But in this movie, he was awesome. I mean, he was fantastic. I think I'd seen him in Cocoon, which was after this. But when I finally saw this one and saw him in that, I was like, wow, he's good, man. I mean, they were all...
He's the mob enforcer in Coppola's The Firm, and he's a bastard in that too. He's a bastard, man. Yeah,
he's in the movie about 3 Mile Island with Jack Lemmon and Jane Fonda. He's in that without a mustache. And then there's a movie called Absence of Malice in the 1980s.
I've heard of that.
12 minutes. He's on for 12 minutes and got nominated for an Academy Award.
That's such a good movie.
For supporting actor. He's brilliant. He just comes in and puts them all to shame. Boom. Yeah. Worth to watch the movie to get to the end where he comes on. He's brilliant. And
all right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. That's it.
Brian, are you good?
No, I'm good. Yeah.
All right. John, number 2.
Going back to a modern day, which in next year will be 25 years old.
Oh, Jesus.
The Devil's Advocate.
Good one. I
forgot about this movie.
Devil's Advocate, in my opinion, was at the time for 1997, a modern telling of the old 70s styles of horror movies.
Yes.
The idea of the devil walking around New York City, which is, to some people, it's not uncommon. But it's
not unheard of. Yeah.
But it's the Keanu Reeves character and the Charlize Theron character, and the way they're being seduced and their response to the seduction. I mean, this is like a 1970s style horror movie, and I'm sorry, Al Pacino rocks in this movie.
Yeah, it's good.
The way, the scene where he's in New York and he just shuffles his clothes and he says, "Look at me. People don't realize I'm the master of my own destiny." And then he goes on the subway and tells the kid to go home and kill his girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, and it's all words. It's just the way he seduces you in and brings you in.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, the scene where he's in the church and he's looking up and just sticks his finger in the holy water is the only thing that would have made it better if it was his middle finger, because that's basically what it was. And it's the whole movie is that seduction.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have somebody like Charlize Theron who's showing you're not getting it. And then at the very end, the ultimate 70s style of horror movies, oh, fuck you, here's a twist.
Yeah.
You weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And the best use of a Rolling Stones song to end the movie. When Al Pacino smiles and goes, "Vanity's definitely my favorite sin," and they're playing Paint It Black.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And everything he says about humanity and man and everything else, you agree.
It resonates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That and what about love? Chemical induction. Just eat a lot of chocolate. He makes it work. And if it was anybody else, I don't think he'd be as charming. And like it or not, people like their devil charming. And he was. He made it work, man. And it's also very scary.
Yeah.
I cried in that movie. When Charlize Theron, what happened to her at the bench at the end, I wept.
Oh, yeah.
Like a baby.
Wow, yeah.
It was bad.
And they bring her from such a beautiful girl and an innocent girl into this destroyed state. Oh my God! It's just through the
her
whole
performance.
Watching it,
that was her first big role. She was in like smaller parts up until then. You watched her totally decline, and then at the end of the movie, when you see her there, you're like, "Oh, thank God!" I actually was. I was so happy that she, was still there, type deal. But it was brilliantly done. I was seduced by the movie.
It was a gruesome movie. It's really, there's some awful things that happen in it.
Mm-hmm.
And John and I recently had covered Angel Heart, where we had De Niro playing the devil.
Yeah.
So they're completely different interpretations.
Yeah.
Because Pacino's at that point where he's much more over the top about things.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. No. I mean, I'm not. That's not a passive aggressive knock. It works. It works.
Well, I
think.
How over the top can you be?
Yeah. Right.
That was kind of in Pacino's shouty phase where he shouted all the time. Give me all you got. It was kind of like that string of movies. Like I love Heat. It's one of my favorite movies, and like where he's like, she's got a great ass, and you got your head all the way up it. It's like that phase of Al Pacino is hilarious because he's just so over the top.
Well, he was going deaf and couldn't hear his own words, I think.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, he was a great seducer.
Yeah.
That's what made it work.
Yeah, the yelling didn't even start till towards the end.
No, that's true.
It was very understated what he did, but there was nothing. There was nothing in that script for him that was without purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the actress who played the daughter, or the one that they went there, she went on to do Gladiator. She went on to do Wonder Woman, playing the head of the.
Connie Nielsen.
It's her. She was introduced from, I think, coming over from Italy.
Oh.
At the time they introduced her to do this movie. There were a lot of good people that were in this to tell this story. Really was. It was and it's very underrated because I mentioned it to people now and they go, "What movie was that?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I think it kind of got lost in the shuffle and kind of fell under the radar because wasn't that the same year Titanic came out?
Yep.
It might have been, yeah.
97. So
and the next movie Keanu Reeves did was The Matrix, and everybody went to The Matrix.
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves even did a good job in that movie.
I like
That was one
Keanu
of the
Reeves.
first bigger hits that came out after,
Yeah.
for a little dry streak he had.
Yeah, I like Keanu.
Well,
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves has how can I put this? He has an evolution.
Yeah.
Right.
And he has evolved beyond, where we started with Point Break and, that sort of thing, or what he was trying to do. Like when you see him in Stoker's Dracula, and I've said this before, Oldman's performance is solid. It's just a shitty story.
Right.
But when you see those castle scenes between him and Oldman, they're at completely different levels. Even 30 years ago, Oldman was, acting rings around. Keanu Reeves, but Keanu Reeves from now, from then is not the same as he is now. And,
on a complete side note, before I pass it to you, Michael, if you get a chance to see a 1980 film called Parenthood, Keanu Reeves before Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that was before Bill and Ted.
Brilliant in it.
I love Bill and Ted. That's my movie.
Maybe he got typecast for a while. I don't know.
But he was Coppola.
He has that surfer draw.
Yeah. Well, Coppola was forced to cast him in Stoker's Dracula because he was the hot property. He had just come off Speed or whatever he was doing before that, Point Break or one of those. Yeah. And Coppola said he would have not. He would if he did this movie. If he did it again, he wouldn't have cast Keanu, but it's because he was hot property at the time and would have, brought in the bucks. I mean,
his great horror contribution will always be Constantine.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I was gonna say,
that's a good one.
Yeah. And then, Keanu Reeves was not what was wrong with that movie. So Coppola should shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Make your wine.
Yeah, exactly. Shut up, all right? Yeah. All right. That brings me to number 2. I have an unusual addition here, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. And yet at the same time, I'm perfectly okay with it. It's a strange sort of pick. And it's a movie that I think I may have seen twice. But for some reason, when I started writing down my list, it landed on number 2. So that's my story. I went with Dr. Sleep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I went into...
How is this the only Stephen King that we really picked?
Yeah. Well, I got Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say that when we talked about Salem's Lot, that came out the same year as the Amityville Horror. And it's just, for a TV movie, it's such a superior movie.
Oh, yeah.
What's more of a haunted house than the Marston House? But whatever. All right, so Dr. Sleep. I walked into the theater with absolutely, in fact, I had less than zero expectations. I thought this movie was just going to suck because I'm like, why are they doing this? Another sequel, completely unnecessary. I had read Dr. Sleep, and for some reason, I just must have been in a place where I just wasn't paying it that much attention as I was reading it. And I walked out of that theater saying, what the hell did I just watch? That was like a master's level performance. It's the Overlook Hotel and the appearance of, because it's relatively new, so I won't spoil it. There's some Overlook, but they go back to the Overlook. Maybe you didn't need to see some people, but it worked. The whole thing worked. The idea that they would now focus on Danny, played by Ewan McGregor, as an adult now, and as an extremely troubled adult who has struggled a great deal in his adult life. Those introductory scenes where we talked about this in Hereditary, where the structure isn't based in horror, it's based on a reality. And this is based on a very damaged person who has, become this, kind of scumbag, this drug-addled alcoholic scumbag because of, what his life has been like and how he manages to sort of turn it around over the course of many years. It isn't like 6 months later, and he's, all shiny and new. It takes him a long time to turn around the problems in his life. And the scene in there where they finally get to about the halfway point and you see the word Red Room I'll never forget this. The hair on my arm just stood all the way up. It's fantastic, and I can't remember the name of the woman who plays the head of the gypsies, who are the villains in the movie. She was just amazing, amazing. The scene where that little boy gets murdered is just one of the most gruesome, graphic things that I've seen in recent memory. Yeah, it's my number 2, man. Stephen King's Dr. Sleep. If you haven't seen it, check it out. What?
Her name is Rebecca Ferguson.
Rebecca Ferguson. That's it. She is amazing.
Yep.
Amazing. A completely different set of antagonists set up for Danny Torrance, who has sort of developed his shine and sort of keeps it in balance for himself so that he's not driven crazy by the fact that he just sees fucked up shit all the time.
Stephen King was interviewed about the book, Dr. Sleep. And he turned around and said he never planned on writing a sequel to any of his stories. And he said he was asleep one night, or he fell asleep one afternoon on the couch, and Danny Torrance, the character that he had in his mind, walked in and wrote Red Room on a notebook and held it up and said, "Don't you think we should go back to this?" And that's how he woke up. That's how King, or why he did it. Because he's like, yeah, whatever happened to him? Because he was a boy. And I was one of the few books. I'm a big fan of Stephen King. People yell at me for reading them.
Same here.
I'm like, I
Lifelong
don't care. There's a lot of people say he's tripe, because I'm like, yeah, tripe in all the way to the bank.
He's so common. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, he writes the stories that he writes, either the Bachman books or the series novels. They're wonderful to watch or read. I mean, and when I read this book, I felt like I was visiting an old friend. So when the movie came out, I went and saw it. And you're right. When it was over, I'm sitting with somebody and they said, "Are you ready to go?" I said, "I can't get up yet." And he goes, "Why?" I said, "My stomach is queasy." That's how much it scared me, to the point I thought I was going to throw up.
And
I haven't felt that way in a while.
He's so commonplace that it's easy to be dismissive.
Yeah.
Because he has so many books and so many movies, and it's just, oh, Stephen King's got another one out. I just saw a friend of mine. She posted something that she just read the new Stephen King. The story I hadn't even heard about yet, so I got to get out and try to grab it. But it's easy to be dismissive, and you forget that some of his works, not all of them, but some of his works, and a good number, not like 3, are actually just masterpieces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And he gets no credit for like the serious stuff he does until it gets made into a movie, like Stand By or Shawshank.
Yeah, Shawshank. Yeah, Shawshank.
Or even The Green Mile.
And like the Shawshank, I think this film adaptation is better than his book, which happens very rarely, where the movie is better.
Yeah.
It's very rare that the movie is better.
With this movie, did they try to tie it into the Shining movie, or is it a standalone?
It's a standalone, but it ends at the Overlook Hotel. They have to go back to the Overlook Hotel.
Okay.
And I mean, but it works.
And it's believable. It's not like they said we have to go back and, oh, look, the Death Star's in the second movie.
This time they have a really big Death Star. Holy shit! Look at the size of that one. Yeah.
The Overlook grew. No. It was, when you went, you were like, shit. That's exactly where they're going.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
And you're along for the ride.
All right, that brings us to our number 1 pick.
All right. Drum roll.
What's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? And we're about to find out from the top 10, Bill, who's going to give us the number 1 in his pick. We've waited 2 weeks. The wait is over.
This is the scariest movie I've ever seen. It still scares the piss out of me. But imagine me being 11 years old and seeing this movie when I first did. And I read the book as well when I was about that age. And I didn't get half of it. But it still scared the living crap out of me, and I still visit it every couple of years because I keep getting drawn back into it. And the scariest thing about it is it's based on supposedly real events. We're talking, of course, about the greatest horror movie of all time, The Exorcist. You cannot get a scarier premise than the devil inside a 12-year-old girl outwitting Jesuit priests. It's absolutely creepy, and the special effects and the soundtrack, and again the music, even though the music it's a hippie prog rock anthem, it never was meant to be this horror soundtrack, but it fit, and now it's the theme from The Exorcist, Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. But it's it all plays into the fact that, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this eye, and it's creeping me out. So The Exorcist grabbed me by the boo-boo when I was a little kid, and it's never let go.
It's been almost...
I can't believe no one else ever picked this movie to be the scariest.
See, it's funny. I saw it. My wife was a big fan of it, so we watched it one night, and I mean, as an adult, I guess if I had seen it as a kid, I would have reacted differently, but I wasn't that scared of it. I actually kind of thought it was funny, the stuff that the demon was saying. I'm like, well, Mercedes McCambridge needs to shout out to her for doing that voice. But I mean, she must have smoked a 30-pack before she did those lines. But I just thought it was kind of funny, the stuff that the demon was saying, like, your mother sucks cocks. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I know that screenwriting, I don't know if they really said that in the book or whatever. I guess I detached myself, but I could see how you would find it scary as a kid or something like that. And the effects are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good story, and I like what's his name in that? Max von Sydow, and is really good as Father Merrick. It's a good story. It never really scared me,
I can dig that, but the scariest part is definitely the sounds. That won an Academy Award for sound design.
Okay.
The opening scene when Max von Sydow is looking at the statue of the demon, and he knows what's coming up, and you hear all these sounds just build into a crescendo. Yeah. There's dogs barking.
That's
just up the wall. That's scary as hell. That's filmmaking. That's not just showing a little girl throwing up pea soup. A little girl saying, you suck cock. That's not scary. What's scary is the sounds and the buildup and the tension. And this movie lets you go from beginning to end. There's a little break when Reagan is normal, but as soon as she starts playing with that Ouija board, and it doesn't stop until she's dead, until Father Karras is dead.
But then I agree with you. I think this was going to be in one of my top 10s, but the other ones I put in for different reasons. Mm-hmm. But I remember when the movie came out, and they used to do commercials for it on the radio.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And you heard Tubular Bells, and they were talking about, there were going to be people with CPR condition, to in case they would have
all that hype.
And my sister, who was 20, went to the movie with my other sister and my cousin. A woman passed out in front of her.
Oh, jeez.
And my sister trained people in CPR. She had to perform it in the movie theater. And my one cousin was so scared she wanted to leave. My sister said, "Fuck you, I bought all 3 tickets. We're watching this movie." And she turned around and faced the audience. She couldn't watch it.
Oh, boy.
And she said the same thing you said about the scary noises. Noises are very scary in a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I wasn't kidding when I said about Night of the Living Dead.
Yes.
The noises freak you out.
Yeah.
And so this was a really, 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 really scary movie. And you can tell how scary it was because every spoof of it for comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The Richard Pryor thing on Saturday Night Live.
That was funny.
They spoofed this movie, and people laughed hard because they said they couldn't in that film.
Right.
Yeah.
It hits you.
It's
it hits you even more if you kind of believe in that. Like, someone who believes that there's a God and a devil.
Yeah.
It hits you even more.
It's I find it to be a perfect film,
Mm-hmm.
which sort of transcends horror. It's a perfect movie. I remember going to the 30th anniversary. They re-released it, I think, in 2003.
Yeah.
In the theaters for the 30th anniversary. And I remember going to sit down and watch it. And there were some kids in there who came in, teenage kids. And you could tell they had no idea what they were about to watch. And there's the scene with she's jamming the crucifix into her, into her hoo-hoo, so to speak. I would say it's a 12-year-old kid. So, I'm not. There's blood flying and, it's just, and these kids literally ran screaming out of the theater because, with the things that she's saying at the time, it's blasphemous. Yeah. I mean, there was overt blasphemy in the dialogue and you just, no one had ever done anything like that before.
Right. Remember, it's 1972. This is still taboo back then.
Yeah, well, you don't see anything. You don't see anybody saying anything like that now.
There's a
Well, hold on. But what I wanted to, I think I saw Friedkin say this, and he said that after so many years and people talking to him about it, he said it breaks down into two types of people. If you want to see darkness, you're going to see darkness. If you want to see pea soup and exorcists and, exorcisms and these sorts of things and the devil, you're going to see that. But he also said, if you want to see faith, and I think that's one of the things that largely gets overlooked in this movie, the faith that ends up overcoming the darkness.
Right.
And the fact that there was a huge article in the New York Times recently about this. And I think I shared it with Bill, and he said he had seen something similar years ago. About the fact that there are at least 4 father figures in this movie that are doing everything they can to save this little girl. They said that it wasn't a coincidence that Blatty made this girl a child of, still reeling because she's a child of divorce. Right. There's no father figure in her life, which sort of makes her susceptible to hanging out in the basement, playing around with, goofy things, and she doesn't, these sorts of things, but that there are these men who step into the breach, so to speak. You've got Father Karras, you've got Father Marin, you've got Detective Kinderman, you've got even Carl, the manservant, who stands the guard, at the door, and changes her diapers and, feeds her and, does all these things. And so there are all these men trying to save this young girl. And these are things that largely get overlooked in the pea soup.
Yeah, right. True. I mean, it's a testament to Blatty and his writing. Obviously, he trained as a Jesuit, didn't make it all the way to ordination. And that's one thing that's missing from just about every other exorcism, devil-based movie out there, is that the theology's all fucked up. They get everything wrong. This movie, it gets everything right to a T.
And the idea that Karras is just burnt out.
Right.
He's burnt out from listening to everyone's problems.
Yep.
Right.
And he's just like the movie starts and Karras is just done. He's sitting there, he's drinking a beer. It was funny because I had never seen a movie where priests are just hanging out in a bar, and there they are, he and this man, and they're just talking, and he's just, the Allman Brothers are playing, a Rambling Man is playing, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. A couple priests just hanging out and having a beer. And he's talking about it. He's like, these guys in their faith and, there's problems with this and that. And this is all I do all day is listen to people's problems. He's like, I don't have any answers anymore for these people. I just want out. And at this exact time that this is happening, and I've seen this format recurring in some of the better exorcism movies, you get the weary sort of reverend or whatever who finally is confronted with this thing that he just can't believe because he ceased to believe.
Right.
He can't believe what's actually happening in front of his own face until you get the Marin character who just comes in and says, no, there's only one personality here.
Yeah.
Right. He's trying to confront it as a man of science. And, Marin comes in immediately, like puts the squash on that. And he's like, no, this is what you thought it was the entire time. He just didn't want to admit.
Right.
Such a great movie.
Which I think it says a lot to humanity, too. That's why some people only saw the pea soup.
Yeah.
because they didn't want to admit it. You know, great movie.
Yeah. One of the
Good choice.
one of the global top twos.
First,
All right.
first genre movie to ever get nominated for an Academy Award, and I think it won 7 out of 11.
Yeah. Wow.
Did Friedkin win that year?
Let's find out.
Yeah, we're not number one. We might as well, we've
Amy,
gone.
pull that shit up.
there's a line in the movie, Oh God. Where
Glad it
George
won for
Burns,
screenplay.
no, I disagree with you, Mike. The better movie than you think. When George Burns turned around and said, "Why don't you have faith in me?" You had faith years ago in that movie about you believed in the devil when that little girl was possessed in the movie a few years ago.
Right.
You had no qualms.
Good movie.
He went, I don't do that. Children, their lives are complicated enough. And I went, what a great line, though. Whoever wrote it was just like, you believed it when it was a little kid.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, one more thing I would say about this. He just passed recently. You get William Peter Blatty gets so little credit for being a great writer.
Yes.
And Bill has touched The Exorcist, and I'm on Exorcist 3. Those are based on Blatty novels. All the other things are based on studio execs making up bullshit. But the Blatty, that is, and we talked about this when we talked about Twilight, when I made that, Eric made that jab at me, but I said, the story was that, the prose and the books were so bad that there's no solid ground. This is bedrock, man.
Yeah.
Blatty's writing is just fucking bedrock,
Yep.
and I own both of those in hard copy. And like Bill, every couple of years I got to come back to them, and they're just so beautiful. Legion is such a beautiful novel.
Yes.
In Kinderman's mind and the things that he thinks as he's sort of despairing over all the murder in the world and all the horrible things that he sees every day. It's so damn poignant, and it easily gets overlooked in favor of lesser authors. Okay.
Yeah. He also wrote the best Pink Panther movie, Shot in the Dark.
Oh God,
that's great. That's a great one.
Okay, fair enough. All right, who do we got? Ryan, number 1, man. Lay it on us.
All right, it is the movie that gave birth to the slasher film, the Alfred Hitchcock classic Psycho.
Yes.
And it really needs no introduction. It tops pretty much every horror list, or it's in the top 5 at least. It is just an American classic. It's a staple. It's a thriller. It's a horror movie. It totally grabs you every time you see it. I watch it every year on Halloween, and I just absolutely fell in love with this movie when I first saw it, and have ever since, because it's the slasher film, but it's very minimal. And the movie starts out one way with, what's her name? I'm drawing a blank on her name. Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, Janet Leigh, where she steals the money and she wants to go back and redeem herself. And all she does is stops at a hotel and just totally grabs you because she gets friggin' murdered out of nowhere. And you think she's the star of the movie, and she gets killed like 20 minutes in. And you're just like, what did I just watch? You have this weirdo Norman Bates who seems normal enough until he pulls that picture back and is peeping at her through the peephole. You know something's up. And then he kills her, and there's no more mention about the money. It's in the trunk of the car that he sinks. It just completely turns a totally different way. It's a movie that you're like, okay, so she wants to go back. And then all of a sudden, boom, she's dead. And you're like, what the hell? And Norman Bates is one of the best screen villains. And Anthony Perkins just makes it work. And it's a shame that the guy got typecast and pretty much didn't really do much after that. I mean, he did a few things here and there, but he was always Norman Bates because he did it so well. And Mike, I know you like the part where Martin Balsam gets killed.
Martin Balsam.
But I refuse to watch that blasphemous Gus Van Sant remake. I refuse to watch that colorized version. I don't care if Vince Vaughn is a good Norman Bates. I don't want to watch it because I don't want to sully my experience of this movie. It's perfect.
When we covered Psycho, I had that guy Stephen Langford on, the writer producer, and we started talking about the book. And I guess the masturbation scene is in the book because in the book he's not a skinny little mousy guy. He's not. He's like this fat, bearded, drink too much, watch too much. Like he's got pornographic magazines apparently laying around. Stop that. He's not the clean cut sort of all American looking, Norman Bates. With Bates, it's very much a spider fly. Like you really kind of have to, go all the way into his trap before he can spring it on you because he's so mousy.
Well, and that's the thing. And Hitchcock hated the book. Hitchcock thought the book was garbage, and that's why he changed the character of Norman Bates, and I think for the better. And what I also like is that people weren't expecting Hitchcock to make this movie. I mean, he was a respected director, and they were like in the movie Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins, which is about the making of this movie and stuff. And they're like, why are you making this B-level garbage? Like what? And he wanted something different, and he created the slasher film. Like I said, he just it was like lightning in a bottle, and it's the violence is very minimal. The shower scene, I mean, you can see like where the knife misses her, but still, it was never. I don't think up to that point you never saw like they never addressed that whole transvestitism and that kind of stuff, or him dressing as his mother because he was just a complete nut. And I mean that whole end speech where Simon Oakland plays the psychiatrist, just his whole that's a fantastic scene. And then where the mother takes over his entire psyche at the end, and she says, "Oh, they wouldn't hurt a fly," or like, "I'm not even going to hurt this fly," and it just leaves it where he's completely lost it. And because it's just on every level, it's just a complete masterpiece.
It's a winner.
Yeah. Absolutely.
One of the things that scared me, I think, the most in this movie is almost at the very end when you hear him running in the basement. You hear the shoes. And you haven't seen him yet. You haven't seen him yet, and you're like, "What the?" Like it sounds like the devil's charging down the down the hall. You're like, "What the hell is this?" And then he appears in a dress, and you're like, "What the fuck?" And
when she finds the dead mother. In the fruit cellar, and it's just
then the steps start hitting. It's like one right on top of the other. It's perfect 1-2 punch from Hitchcock, man. Perfect 1-2. Langford was saying that there's nothing unnecessary in that movie.
Nope.
Right. There's absolutely zero fat in that movie.
Now I believe in the book that Norman Bates had killed other people. I believe he had killed like other women. And so when they're dredging, no, this is in the book, and when they're dredging the car, when they're pulling the car out at the end, they find like the other bodies of other people that he's killed. Because in the movie, it almost makes it seem like this is just like a one-off, and he's like, oh crap, and he really did almost black out when he killed Janet Leigh and Marion Crane. But in the book, he's like a repeat offender, and
All right. That's as solid as it gets, man. It's tough to beat Psycho.
Yeah.
All right, John. Number one, man. What's at the top of the pyramid, so to speak?
A movie that surprised me because I changed my number one over and over and again, but I kept coming back to.
Oh, so you were feeling the pressure too last week, like Eric was talking about. Okay.
And the very first initial time I was writing it, I put something in, but I kept coming back to this movie. 1408.
Yeah.
Okay.
The movie, I think it's because it genuinely surprised me how much I really enjoyed it and got the shit scared out of me.
Another Stephen King.
I was expecting nothing. when I came in to see this movie. I mean, I knew John Cusack was in it. I knew Samuel L. Jackson was in it.
Mm.
But I was expecting nothing when I went in. And then when I went in and saw the character that Cusack played, Mike Enslin, and realized who he was and what he was doing, that he was actually based on a guy who, Christopher Chacon, Chacon. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. But I remember him as a kid because he used to go into haunted houses and debunk them.
Okay.
Long before the days of Fox News, when they were going in there and with the cameras and whatever. He would go in and debunk these things. Like, he's one of the guys that were involved in debunking the Amityville Horror House. He was one of the guys. He did all this stuff. And the thing about it was, I always thought the guy was, and to Cusack's credit, he was a jerk. He was very arrogant, very pompous, very much, fuck you, I'm right, you're wrong. And in this movie, when Samuel L. Jackson's saying, no, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you. You're going to get hurt. No, I'm fighting. All right, here you go. And he does. Throughout this movie, with each scene and different places he's going, it's like, and I found myself laughing and enjoying it. Good, you fucker. Yeah, boom. You should get knocked out. Like a street fight. But then as it went on, I was like, all right, man, come on, let him up.
Yeah.
Let him up.
Yeah, won't let him out.
You were like, because you didn't like him. I didn't. And then all of a sudden at the end, you're like, oh, fuck, you wanted him to get out.
Yeah.
To me, that's a good sign of when you don't like the protagonist and at the end you don't want to see him die.
Right.
To me, that's a really good sign of a good story and a good horror movie. And it was. I mean, even the hotel's name was the Dolphin Hotel, which, if you know, with the Dolphin was a when Louis XVI, they thought escaped, or his son escaped after the
French Revolution.
The French Revolution. There were people in the South, because Mark Twain talked about it, called the Dauphin. And that's what they would call themselves because they were pretending to be something else.
Right.
And in that movie, to me, when his assistant goes, there's no 14th floor. And all of a sudden he doesn't know where the fuck he is. That's why I'm like, of course they're calling it. It's pretending to be something else.
Right.
Samuel Jackson and John Cusack, that scene when they're talking, that's an acting class. Somebody record that and show it. That's how a conversation should be done. Because it's very much, I know more than you, and Samuel Jackson's going, the fuck you don't.
I gotta watch this again because I only saw it one time and I really liked it. And then this is one of those movies you never get around to again.
And I agree.
I saw
it took me years to come back to it.
Yeah, it was like I watched it like in the middle of the afternoon on one of those Encore channels or something like that over my dad's place.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, this is a really good fucking movie. And then I just, And
I've always gone for a movie where I like the actors, and I've always liked John Cusack. I've seen movies, but I've always liked John Cusack. And when I saw Samuel L. Jackson, I'm like, oh, well, what the hell? And it was literally, what the hell? Let's watch it.
Yeah.
And I was like, why the fuck did I miss this? Why didn't I watch this before?
I think it's one of those movies that got bypassed.
Yeah.
It's very underrated. It's a very underrated movie. Very underrated.
I think that's why I came back to it.
Okay.
Because I know for the number one, everybody goes for the, could go, and I agree with everybody's number one pick so far. I mean, they're brilliant films. But I'm like, here's something you might not have seen, and it's good. Boom.
Well, hopefully I won't have picked Popeye the Sailor Man with Robin Williams for my number one.
There you go.
Shelley Duvall's in that too, though. Who played Bluto in that movie?
That octopus at the end. Though.
The actor who played Bluto was a guy named Paul L. Smith. He wasn't in a lot of stuff. I think he did more theater than movies.
Okay. Well, hopefully, I'm sorry, John. I apologize.
Oh no, not at all. I'm drinking water.
Okay.
There's a series of questions that's done, and I even double checked it on Google because it was done on YouTube. There's people saying, is 1408 too scary? There are people who actually sit and discuss, is it too scary? Like, do certain kids, like at the age of 12 or whatever, not to watch it because it'll fuck with their head.
Yeah.
Type deal.
Yeah, it hits heavy, man. It doesn't pull any punches.
And that's what that was the other thing that got me interested in it, because there's people going, yeah, but I like scary. Yeah, but it's not this scary. You know,
Right.
To me, it goes back to what The Exorcist was when when the kids walked in and they didn't know what they were seeing, and when they started watching it, they
literally, the girls literally screamed, and when she was attacking herself with that crucifix, screamed and just ran out of the movie theater. I don't think they came back.
Yeah,
I don't think, and nor would they.
It's not an unusual, it's not an incorrect
but that's
reaction.
the point. When you get a movie that's scary, that it's that like, oh fuck, when you're done with it, and I mean, I do. I really find myself, the more and more I come back to it, I'm like, I'm glad I picked this because it's a hell of a movie, and I think it needs a little attention.
All right,
take us home, Mike.
All right, here we go. The number one, we're going to close the circle right here. This is, for you two, John and Bill, it may not be much of a surprise. It's just, I'm just going to list it. It's Hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
This movie, to me, is the destination. This is what you want in terms of writing. This is what you want in terms of performance. This is what you want in terms of direction. This movie deceives you by seeming to start out slow, and what you realize by the time you finish the movie was that the entire time it was in sixth gear. This movie is an overdrive from start to finish, and you don't realize it. From the beginning to the end, the things that they show you, even at the very beginning of the movie, we talked about this in the funeral scene, with strange people. They're sort of viewing in on strange people. You don't realize when the guys, Peter is doing a bong hit out the window. The young son is sneaking a bong hit from his parents. You see smoke coming from outside the house, out in the woods. Someone's watching them. This entire time, this sort of horrific grooming is occurring, and it's basically the story of a matriarch who dies, and this family who is just extremely isolated, who begins to suffer these sledgehammer blows, not understanding that almost everything has been choreographed to this. Some of perhaps the most evil I've ever seen in a story.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I got up one night. I couldn't sleep. This was years ago when I was overseas, and I was staying with my dad for a couple of days. And I couldn't sleep, and I just pulled out my tablet and said, I'm going to watch a movie. And it was midnight, and by the time 2:30 rolled around, I said that was the greatest horror movie I've ever seen. I would put it on par with The Exorcist. It doesn't have the bedrock novelization from Blatty's story, which somehow to me makes it more impressive. That someone would just craft a story like this without some sort of large text to work on. Toni Collette is just in another universe. Gabriel Byrne is just in another universe. The boy that plays Peter, is just an amazing actor. Millie Shapiro, who plays Charlie. Everybody is just in, like John Travolta said in Pulp Fiction, a race car in the red, man. And it's so quiet and understated. There's no shouting. There's very little screaming. And it's a master class in what horror is supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to be. And it was funny because I got into it yesterday. I can't believe I did this, but I got into it with somebody on Twitter who was saying that they should do a remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I said, for God's sake, stop it. Stop. That's what I said. Was literally my response. For God's sake, stop it. You know, don't we have enough reboots? Don't we have enough remakes? Don't we have enough sequels? You know, can't we just have some original content? Because when the pathway is open and original content is free to go forward, unobstructed by this bullshit that we're constantly subjected to, we have the opportunity to have more movies like this.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think horror, I think the horror genre is still one of the few. I mean, yes, it has its share of remakes and reboots and stuff like that, but I think horror movies still do have the opportunity to be original, for an original one to come along every once in a while, because you can do whatever you want pretty much. If you're not destroying a franchise, you know, if you're not remaking Freddy for the 18th time, or Michael Myers or Leatherface or Jason, you know, there are those underground directors, there are those independent people who are out there making some great stuff. And, you know, you get the right cast, like in the case of this, you have something good. So
there are a lot of good independent horror films out there. But they're not getting their due because the mainstream studios are just pumping the shit.
Yeah, they don't want to see that.
Who for some, and I told the guy, like, he said something sort of snooty to me, and I'm like, the fact that you're encouraging this unoriginal bullshit, this mediocre, you know, it's frustrating.
The Suits show, since we always keep referring to them as the Suits, you know, it's da 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 da. You know, look at us over here. When it comes to horror, and I'll even go one step further, Ryan, it's horror allows the single voice.
To
come in and say, "Impress me if you can," and if it is, it'll be found. Yeah. Like this, I mean, if you look at the top 5 that some of us were talking about, Night of the Living Dead, Evil Dead, you know, this movie, which were low budgets and came from, you know, creative minds, and it's, you know, it made it, at least in our case, it's our top 5 list. People, and it still affects people, and still. It's the concept of storytelling. Mike, you and I were talking about this movie, and one of the things I can't remember if I said or I wanted to say, it's the equivalent of telling a story in front of a fire. Like if there's a bonfire, the guy's telling you a ghost story type deal with this, and it's a good story, and that's the basis of which. That's why the car runs so well. You got a good story, and you got the people who are in it saying, "Let's try." And this. And I agree. This story it's scary, and I go back to it.
But it's relatable. It's relatable because you've got a family that's just falling apart.
Right.
You know, for a lot of very human reasons.
Yeah.
A lot of non-supernatural reasons. Now, you realize there's some outside manipulation, but, I mean, there are things that any family would be able to relate to. You know, and that's just what makes it. That's what makes it great. Again, you know, it's like we said last week. It's not rooted in horror. It's rooted in this reality of this very fucked up family.
The wolf doesn't go for the flock. It goes for the staggering.
It goes for the weak one in the back with the bad leg. Right. Yeah, exactly right. The little small one, you know, unprotected, and got a bad leg. You're going to get eaten. Tiger's coming after you.
And it really does work, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Really does.
That's it.
All right.
Well, you know, we've been at it for 2 hours.
Wow.
That's double.
My battery's dying.
You know something? We were talking about Rogan last week, and I was watching. You know, this is the longest show we've ever done. But you know something? He did 4 3-hour shows last week.
Jeez.
Completely different people. Completely different topics. Elk meat may have come into it once or twice. But you know, but I mean, you know something? It didn't pass like 2 hours. I mean, you know, because you know we're talking about things that we give a shit about, and you know that are fun, and you know we love having these types of conversations. So Thanks to all of you.
Beer.
No one?
And when it comes to someone like me, my brother Paul always said, you can talk a fish to death. So,
Well, we're not suffering here.
yeah.
All right. Well, listen. Let's wrap it up. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 p.m. Rod and I will be there with the Late Show for Train to Busan, and then on Thursday, John and I will be back to cover some Sam Raimi and Drag Me to Hell.
Absolutely.
Until then, don't waste your time with bullshit. Good night.
All right.